They said it was madness, that an old widow, her body scarred by time and her soul by loss, could not face down a mountain of flesh. The slicing wind of the Alaskan interior, registering a punishing 95 degrees, seemed to whisper the same warning as Anya, with her eagle eyes and lion heart, fixed her gaze on the endless tundra. The village was starving, and their last hope was the legendary great tundra ox, a colossal creature weighing over 11 pounds that even the strongest hunters dared not challenge. But Anya, gripping the ancient hunting tools of her deceased husband Elias in her calloused hands, felt the roar of her grandchildren's hunger echo louder than any fear, and she set out. She knew every step on the treacherous ice was a step toward an uncertain fate, a frozen embrace of death. And what she would discover in the white vastness was not merely a beast, but the very personification of the chasm separating life from extinction for all of Tuktu. Anya felt the weight of the silence swallow the last sounds of the village. Every snowflake dancing in the air seemed to carry the lament of ancestral winds, and the cold, previously just an annoyance, now became a palpable adversary, biting her exposed skin and infiltrating the layers of her caribou hides. She pressed her lips into a thin, determined line on her wrinkled face, adjusting the fur hood that barely shielded her ears from the cutting ice. Elias's hunting tools, a robust harpoon and a sharp knife, felt strangely light in her hands, yet the warmth of his memories heated her chest. It was as if Elias's strength guided her, her every step echoing his own across the virgin snow. The ground was a treacherous tapestry of ice and compacted snow, and Anya needed all her wisdom not to slip. Her eyes, accustomed to the immensity, scanned the horizon for any sign, any track that might indicate the presence of the legendary great tundra ox. There was nothing but white and blue-gray, an infinite canvas where time seemed to have stopped. The solitude was a heavy companion, but she embraced it, knowing that the despair of her village was far more oppressive. In the tiny cabin, Anya's grandchildren, Sasha and Lenny, watched the thin smoke rise from the chimney, their eyes wide and hungry. Lenny, the younger one, nestled in Sasha's lap, her stomach rumbling in protest. "Grandma will come back, won't she?" Lenny whispered, her voice choked by weakness. Sasha, though older, felt the same fear but tried to sound strong. "Of course she will, Lenny. Grandma is the bravest of all. She always tells us the stories of our ancestors, how they overcame the cold and the darkness. She will bring food." Sasha's promise was more for himself than for his sister, a tenuous thread of hope he held onto with all his strength. Far away, Anya felt a chill that didn't come from the wind. It was the image of her grandchildren's thin faces, the memory of their silent pleas for food. That vision was her fuel, more potent than any sustenance. She remembered the stories Elias told about the great tundra ox, a spirit of the frozen north, almost a myth. He spoke of its unmatched strength, its ability to vanish into the blizzard. But Elias also spoke of the cunning, the patience, the connection to the land that the native hunters of the region possessed. Anya was not a hunter, not like Elias, but she was a woman of the interior, and the wisdom of her people ran in her veins. She paused for a moment, her gloved hands gripping the handles of the tools. The cold was becoming unbearable, but she could not yield. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the frozen air burn her nostrils. In her mind, she saw Elias's face, smiling, encouraging her. She heard the voices of her ancestors, whispering secrets of survival in the wind. They reminded her that true strength was not in muscles, but in the resilience of the spirit. Anya opened her eyes, a new determination shining in them. She was not alone. She carried the legacy of her people, the love for her family, and the hope of Tuktu with every step. The abyss was deep, yes, but the bridge would be forged from her own courage. She continued on, a small, resilient figure against the white immensity, searching for the impossible. Anya, new determination warming her chest, took one step, then another, into the white immensity. The air, so frigid it seemed to burn her lungs with every inhalation, was a constant reminder of the fragility of life here. Her eyes, accustomed to the dim light and the snow's reflections, scanned the landscape, searching for what most would never see. She wasn't just looking for obvious tracks, but for subtle disturbances in the snow. The marks left by the wind deflecting off a colossal mass, the almost imperceptible scent the great animal might leave in the rare air. The wisdom of Elias, of her ancestors, was her compass. Hours dragged on, each a test of endurance. The sun, a pale disk in the sky, offered little light and no heat. Anya felt the pang of hunger, a distant echo of the one tormenting her grandchildren. She bit her lower lip, the physical pain serving as a reminder of her purpose. She could not fail. The image of Lenny's hungry eyes and Sasha's silent worry was a fire burning inside her, stronger than the cold that engulfed her. She thought of Elias, how he had taught her to read the tundra like an open book, to sense the presence of life even in the most desolate landscape. That was when she saw it, not a clear footprint, but an almost imperceptible depression in the snow where the ice had broken in an unusual way. She bent down, ignoring the stiffness in her knees, and touched the spot with her glove. It was fresh, massive, unmistakable. The great tundra ox had passed by, perhaps hours ago, perhaps less. A shiver of excitement and dread ran down her spine. The legend was real, and she was on its trail. In the cabin, Sasha tried to keep the hearth flame alive with the last scraps of wood. Lenny, huddled under a pile of furs, coughed faintly. "Sasha, I'm so hungry," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the dying embers. Sasha swallowed hard. The promise that Grandma would return with food seemed increasingly distant. He took Lenny's small hand, which was cold and fragile. "Grandma is strong, Lenny. Remember how she taught us to tie the tightest knots for the snares. She is the smartest. Nobody knows the tundra like her." He was trying to instill confidence in his sister, but every word was an effort to convince himself. Far away, Anya followed the trail, which was now becoming more distinct. The footprints were gigantic, each the size of a small tabletop, sinking deeply into the snow. The animal was colossal, just as the stories said. The sheer size of the creature was terrifying, but Anya refused to falter. She remembered Elias, who always said that hunting was not about brute strength, but about patience and respect. She felt the presence of the tundra spirit around her, and the connection to her ancestors was a protective cloak against fear. She stopped again, not from fatigue, but to observe. The trail led to an area of jagged rocks where the wind formed snow eddies, a dangerous place, but also a potential hiding spot. Anya knew she needed to be cautious. The ox was not merely an animal, it was a force of nature. She gripped the harpoon, feeling the familiar weight of the wood in her hands. Her eyes, now more focused than ever, watched every shadow, every movement of the wind. She was getting closer. The confrontation was inevitable, and she would need all her cunning and courage to face the challenge ahead. The hope of Tuktu depended on her. Anya, the harpoon firmly grasped, advanced with the stealth of a shadow. The wind howled, whipping snow into her face and obscuring her vision, but her eyes, sharpened by years of life in the tundra, tried to penetrate the white curtain. The jagged rocks, which before seemed only a potential refuge, now revealed themselves to be a natural fortress for the creature. Every step was a calculation, every breath an act of will. The cold seemed intent on freezing not just her bones, but the very indomitable flame of her soul. She remembered Elias, how he taught her to read the wind, to feel the vibrations of the earth. "The greatest hunter is not the strongest, Anya, but the one who hears the silence and sees the invisible," he would say, his voice deep and wise. She crept behind a rocky outcrop, her heart pounding heavily in her chest. The silence, which was sometimes her companion, now felt oppressive. There was no sound of hooves, no brushing of thick fur against the rock, only the wind and the sound of her own ragged breathing. Anya closed her eyes for an instant, seeking calm. In her mind, she saw herself as a child, learning to track small animals with her father, feeling the earth beneath her feet. That ancestral connection was her true strength. Inside the cabin, the situation was increasingly desperate. Sasha, his hands red and cracked, tried to start a fire with thin twigs that barely burned. Smoke filled the small space, making Lenny cough harder. The girl, pale and with bluish lips, shivered beneath the furs. I'm so cold, Sasha," she murmured, tears streaming down her thin face. Sasha hugged her tightly, feeling the fragility of his sister's body. He knew that Grandma's stories of ancestral bravery were losing their power against the cruel reality of hunger and cold. His own stomach ached, and weakness kept him from thinking clearly. He looked at the door, out into the darkness, and a chilling despair began to infiltrate his young heart. Outside, Anya finally saw it. It wasn't an ordinary ox. It was a living mountain of white fur and massive horns, almost indistinguishable from the snowy landscape. It lay, majestic and imposing, in a crevice protected by the rocks, the hot vapor of its breath forming small clouds in the icy air. Its eyes, deep and dark, were half closed, but Anya felt the weight of its presence, the latent force of 11 pounds of pure wilderness. It was even larger than Elias had described, a creature that seemed to have emerged from an ancient dream. A primal fear tried to seize Anya, a fear that urged her to run, to hide, to give up. But she shoved it to the back of her mind. She remembered the faces of Sasha and Lenny, the promise she had made to herself and to Elias. That ox was not just a beast. It was the life of her village, the hope of her people. She gripped the harpoon, feeling the rough wood against her gloves. Her ancestors were watching. Elias was guiding her. She took a deep breath, the icy air burning her lungs, and began to move, every muscle tense, every sense heightened. Cunning, patience, respect for the creature, yes, but also an indomitable courage. She was not a hunter. She was a grandmother, and she would do the impossible for her grandchildren. The confrontation was about to begin, and Anya knew there was no turning back. Anya crouched, observing the sleeping giant. Its curved, pointed horns looked like blades of ice, and the thick, tangled fur protected it from all cold. She noticed how the snow accumulated around its massive paws, indicating it had been there for some time, perhaps exhausted by the recent blizzard. A plan began to form in her mind, a whisper of ancestral wisdom that Elias had told her about the vulnerability of giants in their deep sleep. It was not about strength, but precision, finding the chink in nature's armor. She needed a distraction, something that would make it react without realizing her true intention. With a slow, deliberate movement, Anya picked up a small stone from the frozen ground. Her fingers, though gloved, felt the rock's rough texture. She knew she had to be perfect. Any mistake could mean the end of her journey and, consequently, the end of Tuktu. Fear tried to rise again, but she suffocated it with the image of Lenny's starving eyes. She could not fail. The stone flew, describing a subtle arc in the icy air, and landed with a soft thud in a pile of snow a few yards from the ox, far enough not to alarm it directly, but close enough for the sound to be noticed. The great tundra ox shuddered. One of its eyes slowly opened, deep and cautious, sweeping the landscape. It snorted, hot, dense vapor streaming from its nostrils, and rose with a slow, powerful movement, shaking the snow from its back. The ground trembled slightly under Anya's feet. The creature was even more imposing standing up, a wall of life against the white vastness. She shrank further behind the rock, her heart pounding like a drum. The ox looked toward where the stone had fallen. its senses sharpened by the invisible threat. Anya knew this was the moment. She needed to act, but with the cunning of a tundra spirit, not the brute force of a hunter. The survival of her village depended on her next move. Anya shrank back even more, her heart beating erratically. The great tundra ox, a living mountain, was now standing, its deep, cautious eyes scanning the landscape for the source of the sound. The creature snorted again, the hot vapor of its breath mingling with the icy air, and took a heavy step, its massive paws sinking into the snow like pillars. The ground shook beneath Anya's feet, and she felt the intense cold of the rock through her gloves, a vivid reminder of her own fragile existence before such power. She gripped the harpoon, the rough wood against her gloved fingers, and tried to calm her breathing. Cunning, patience, respect. Elias's words echoed in her mind, but now the sight of the colossal beast, so close, almost palpable, brought a new kind of dread. How could a woman her age, no matter how determined, face such an overwhelming force of nature? The ox moved its head, its massive horns pointing toward the grey sky, and then, with a slow, deliberate movement, began to turn. It was at that instant that Anya saw it. Hidden behind the giant's rear leg, nestled in the snow, was a small shape, a calf. Barely the size of a large dog, with fluffy white fur trembling slightly in the biting cold. Its eyes, large and innocent, blinked, and it let out a weak, almost inaudible lowing, seeking its mother's warmth. A shock ran through Anya, colder than the tundra wind. The image of the calf, so vulnerable, so dependent, hit her like a blow to the chest. She thought of Lenny, of Sasha, the way she protected them, kept them warm, fed them. That small being there in the frozen immensity was a mirror of her own grandchildren. The hunt, which had been a matter of survival, of relentless necessity, transformed into a heartbreaking dilemma. How could she, a grandmother who would do anything for her family, take the life of a mother protecting her calf? In the cabin, Sasha rubbed Lenny's hands, trying to warm them. The girl coughed incessantly, and her small body trembled uncontrollably. Grandma is taking too long," Lenny murmured, her voice barely a thread. Sasha felt a knot in his throat. The wood was gone, and the embers in the hearth were almost dead. The cold seeped through the cracks in the wall, and the smell of smoke mixed with his sister's damp, feverish breath. He looked at the empty food pot, and a frozen tear rolled down his pale face. Hope, once so strong, was now a flickering flame. He closed his eyes, praying for Grandma to return, to bring the miracle only she could deliver. Far away, Anya felt the weight of the decision. The mother ox, oblivious to her presence, licked the calf tenderly, a gesture that wrenched Anya's heart. It was not just a colossal animal, a means to an end. It was a life with its own bonds, its own love. The ancestral wisdom that guided her spoke of respect for nature, of taking only what was necessary. But what was necessary when the life of her entire village was at stake? Anya closed her eyes again, seeking a clarity that seemed to be slipping away. Her ancestors watched her, yes, but they also taught her to find a path, even when all roads seemed blocked. It wasn't about brute force, but cunning, about understanding the creature and its environment. She needed a new plan, one that honored life, but also saved Tuktu. The harpoon, once a weapon, now felt like a heavy weight in her hands. The survival of her village depended on her next move, but now that move carried a far greater emotional cost. Anya opened her eyes. A new determination, tinged with sorrow, flared in them. She could not hesitate. The lives of Lenny and Sasha, the life of Tuktu, were more important than her pain. She would not be cruel. Elias had taught her that the tundra was a book of secrets, and every creature had its weakness, not of strength, but of environment. She remembered an old story, a hunter who used the ice against a gigantic polar bear without spilling blood. The idea was audacious, dangerous, perhaps the only way. She observed the ox and its calf. The giant, still cautious, moved slowly, protecting the little one with its massive body. Anya noticed how it avoided a specific area of the rocky ground where the snow seemed thinner, and the sound of the wind was different. An ancient instinct, a whisper of the spirits, warned her. There, beneath the thin layer of ice and snow, there might be a fissure, a natural trap that winter had created. It was an immense risk, but Tuktu's hunger was an even greater one. With a heavy heart, Anya began to move, not toward the ox, but in a wide arc, using the rocks for cover. She needed to lure it, without it realizing her intention. Every step was an act of faith, every movement a silent prayer. She knew she had to be faster and smarter. The plan was risky. Guide the ox to that weak point in the terrain, making it fall without raising the harpoon in a direct attack. It would be an act of cunning, not violence. In the cabin, the cold was becoming unbearable. Sasha tried to warm Lenny with his body, but his sister's trembling was constant. Purple lips, shallow breath. "Sasha, I'm scared," Lenny mumbled, her voice almost inaudible. Sasha felt despair tear through his chest. The promise of food, the warmth of Grandma, all seemed a distant dream. He hugged Lenny tighter, tears streaming down his face. He didn't know what to do anymore. Hope was draining away with the heat of the hearth. Outside, Anya was in position. She grabbed snow and threw it hard against a distant rock, creating a sharp sound. The mother ox abruptly raised its head, eyes fixed on the direction of the noise. The calf, startled, nestled closer to her. The creature snorted, a warning, and began to move, slowly, toward the source of the sound. Anya watched, tense. It was going in the right direction, but still hesitated. She needed one more push, one last act of courage. With a painful twist in her gut, she knew she would need to reveal herself, to take a risk so the ox would follow her. It was the only way. The life of Tuktu and her own were at stake. Anya took a deep breath, the icy air burning her lungs. The decision was made. With a lump in her throat, she slowly rose from behind the rock, revealing her small figure to the imposing creature. Her eyes, which before sought cunning, now carried a mixture of fear and unshakable resolve. The mother ox, seeing her, snorted with a force that made the snow tremble. Its massive horns tilted slightly, a clear warning, and it took a step forward, protecting the calf with its colossal body. Anya felt her heart race, but she did not look away. She knew she had to be convincing, needed the animal to see her as a real threat, but not as a bloodthirsty hunter. With the harpoon still in hand, she made a subtle movement, almost a dance, to the right, toward the area of thinner ice. The ox, with its instinctive intelligence, followed her movement with its eyes, a low, guttural growl echoing in the silence of the tundra. Anya took another step, then another, always maintaining a safe but visible distance. She felt the cold penetrate her clothing, the accumulated fatigue of days of pursuit weighing on her shoulders. But the image of Lenny shivering from cold and hunger was a fire that propelled her. She was not a hunter by choice, but by love. The ox, seeing her move away from the calf, decided to act. With a burst of strength surprising for its size, it charged, its huge paws raising clouds of snow. Anya ran, not in panic, but with calculated purpose. Every step was a prayer, every breath an effort. She heard the heavy sound of the hooves behind her, feeling the vibration of the earth, the animal's hot breath on the back of her neck. The fear was real, but the determination was greater. She guided the giant, as Elias had taught her to guide the livestock to the safer pastures, but now the danger was herself. She approached the area she had identified. The ice there looked darker, more fragile. Anya made an abrupt move to the side, almost slipping, and the ox, in its blind pursuit, continued straight. Its eyes were fixed on her, its protective fury preventing it from noticing the natural trap that stretched beneath its feet. In the cabin, Sasha was desperately trying to rekindle the fire. His fingers were numb, and the damp wood refused to catch flame. Lenny was motionless in his arms, her breath so faint it could barely be felt. "Lenny, please, Lenny, talk to me," Sasha whispered, tears freezing on his cheeks. He hugged his sister with all the strength he had left, but felt her body getting colder, lighter. Hope, which was once an ember, was now just ashes. He closed his eyes, praying for Grandma to return, to bring the miracle only she could bring. Outside, the moment came. The ox, with a roar of challenge, stepped firmly onto the area of weak ice. There was a terrifying crack, a sound that tore through the silence of the tundra like thunder. The giant's eyes widened in surprise and panic. The ice gave way under its colossal weight. With a desperate bellow, the ox sank, its hind legs disappearing into the fissure. The calf, following closely, stopped abruptly, lowing in despair. The ox thrashed, trying to free itself, but the ice held it firmly, immobilizing it without seriously injuring it. Anya stopped, panting, watching the scene. Relief flooded her, mixed with a deep sadness for the creature. She had not shed blood, but she had fulfilled her mission. The life of Tuktu was saved. The harpoon in her hands was no longer a weight, but a symbol of her courage and unwavering love for her grandchildren. Anya watched the ox struggle, the creature's desperate bellow echoing in the white immensity. The calf, still lowing, tried to approach, but the cracked ice prevented it. The mother ox's eyes expressed panic and resignation. Nature, relentless, had done what Anya had not dared. The 95-degree cold, her enemy, was now her silent ally. She knew the creature wouldn't last long, trapped and exposed. A wave of sadness washed over her, mixed with the relief of having accomplished the mission without shedding blood. The cunning of the ancestors guided her. Use the environment. But the sight of the calf, so small and helpless, tightened her grandmother's heart. She approached cautiously, the harpoon used as a support. The ox saw her, and a final breath of fury mixed with despair came from its nostrils. Anya stopped at a safe distance, her eyes fixed on its. "Forgive me, great spirit of the tundra," she whispered, "but the lives of my grandchildren and my village depend on this." A tear froze on her cheek. Victory had a bitter taste, but it was the only possible one. The next challenge was colossal. How could a woman her age, alone, butcher and transport 11,000 pounds of meat? It was a task for several men, not for her, exhausted. Tuktu was invisible in the blizzard. She needed help, and fast. Lenny and Sasha had no more time. In the cabin, the silence was as oppressive as the cold. Sasha, his body numb, felt Lenny's breathing growing weaker. The girl, pale as snow, barely moved. Her lips were purple, and a small moan escaped, a sound that tore her brother's heart. Sasha tried to sing a lullaby, but his voice was a hoarse, strengthless whisper. He hugged his sister, trying to transfer the little warmth left in his body. The smell of smoke, once hope, was now a reminder of the fire that refused to light. The small flame of the oil lamp flickered, threatening to go out, and with it, Sasha's last spark of hope. He closed his eyes, tears freezing on his eyelids, and a chilling despair engulfed him. The grandmother had promised, but the tundra was cruel, and he knew she might not return. Outside, Anya realized she couldn't wait. The ox was already weakening, its eyes closing. She needed to signal the village. But how? The wind howled. Visibility was almost zero. She remembered Elias, how he used smoke fires. But she didn't have enough wood, and Sasha's fire in the cabin was a luxury she didn't possess here. Her eyes scanned the landscape, searching for something. She saw a pile of dry branches, brought by the wind and accumulated in a rocky crevice. It wasn't much, but perhaps enough for dense, dark smoke, visible even in the blizzard if she could light it. The idea was risky, starting a fire in the frozen tundra. with her fingers almost insensitive and the wind cutting, was a challenge. Time was the enemy. She needed to act with urgency. With a heavy heart but new determination, Anya began to gather the branches, her movements slow and painful, driven by the unwavering love for her grandchildren. Each branch was a prayer, each effort, a promise of life she would fulfill to save Tuktu. Anya, her gloved fingers already hardened by the cold, struggled to gather the scattered branches. Every movement was agony, her muscles protesting against the effort. The wind howled, mocking her fragility, and the fine snow whipped her face, but she did not stop. The image of Lenny, pale and weak, was a whip to her soul, propelling her. She needed fire, not for warmth, but to scream for help in the white vastness. With a small pile of kindling and dry moss, Anya crouched behind a rock, trying to shield the material from the merciless wind. She pulled out the flint striker Elias had given her, a wedding present, and with trembling hands began to try to strike a spark. Once, twice, 3 times, the metal scraped the stone, and only small, ephemeral sparks appeared, dying before touching the moss. Frustration threatened to crush her, but she refused to yield. She remembered Elias, his infinite patience, how he had taught her to respect fire. "He is a spirit, Anya," he had said. "He must be courted, not forced." She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for an instant, and asked the ancestors for strength. In the cabin, Sasha felt Lenny's body grow even colder in his arms. The girl no longer coughed, and her breathing was so shallow that Sasha had to put his ear to her chest to feel the faint pulse of life. "Lenny, little sister," he whispered, his voice choked with panic. There was no answer. Lenny's eyes were half closed, and her lips, once purple, now had an almost bluish tinge. The smell of smoke had disappeared completely, and the cold inside the cabin was as intense as the cold outside. Sasha trembled, not just from the cold, but from a fear that paralyzed him. He hugged her with all his strength, trying in vain to transfer the warmth of his own exhausted body. Tears froze on his cheeks, and a silent lament escaped his throat. Hope, the last ember, had been extinguished. Outside, Anya, with renewed determination, tried again. This time, she used a small piece of dry birch bark, which Elias had taught her was an excellent fire starter. She scraped the flint with more care, and a spark, stronger than the others, fell onto the bark. A faint thread of smoke rose, and Anya blew gently, with the care of a mother cradling her child. The flame was born, small and fragile, but alive. She fed it with the thinnest twigs, then with the moss, and finally with the larger branches. The fire, though small, began to crackle, casting an orange glow in the grey darkness of the blizzard. But the smoke, white and sparse, would not be visible over long distances. Anya needed something more. Her eyes scanned the ground, and she saw it. A piece of old leather, perhaps from an abandoned sled, half buried in the snow. It was heavy and damp, but it would burn slowly, producing dense, dark smoke. With monumental effort, she dragged it near the fire. The strong, acrid smell of burning leather rose into the air, mixing with the smell of snow and wind. The smoke, previously white, began to darken, becoming a dark grey column that soared against the pale sky. It was a signal, a visible prayer, that she hoped would reach the eyes of someone in Tuktu. In the village, the elder Jonas, who was watching the horizon with growing concern, rubbed his eyes. He had spent his entire life in the tundra, and his eyes, though tired, were keen. He saw it, a dark smudge on the horizon that seemed to dance with the wind. It wasn't a snow cloud, nor the shadow of a distant mountain. It was smoke, dark, dense smoke, rising from the direction where Anya had left. His heart, heavy with the hopelessness of the last few hours, leaped. "Smoke!" he cried, his voice hoarse, tearing through the silence of the village. "It's Anya! She's alive!" The few people who were outside, huddled against the cold, turned, their eyes following Jonas's trembling finger. The dark smudge was unmistakable now. A wave of shock and hope swept through Tuktu. Anya had succeeded. She had sent a signal. The village, which was on the verge of collapse, felt a new breath of life. The impossible had happened. The dark smoke, a beacon of hope in the white immensity, galvanized the village. Jonas, tears streaming down his weather-beaten face, pointed again, his voice choked with emotion. "She made it! Anya made it!" The cry echoed, and the few figures huddled outside began to move. The apathy that had settled in recent days dissolved, replaced by a feverish energy. Men and women, previously stooped by cold and hunger, lifted their heads. Their eyes, which had lost their sparkle, now reflected a glimmer of life. "We have to go!" Jonas ordered, his voice gaining strength. "We need sleds, ropes! She can't do this alone!" Despite their weakness, the community rallied. Hands, previously slow and numb, now worked with renewed purpose. Dusty sleds were unearthed. Thick ropes, saved for better times, were unrolled. Each person, in their own way, prepared for the journey, driven by the image of the solitary elder who had defied the tundra for them. Hope, once a whisper, was now a silent chorus of determination. Outside, Anya, exhausted, watched the smoke from her fire ascend. Her fingers were nearly frozen, and her body trembled uncontrollably, not just from the cold, but from the tension that was finally starting to subside. She sat in the snow, leaning against a rock, her eyes fixed on the ox, which was now motionless, trapped in the fissure, its body already covered by a thin layer of snow. Sadness still gripped her, but the certainty of having acted for the greater good was a balm. She knew the villagers would come, the smoke was a scream, and Tuktu would answer. In the cabin, Sasha felt a chill. It wasn't the cold, but a strange sensation, almost a premonition. Lenny was pale, and her breathing was so faint he could barely sense it. He hugged her tighter, despair consuming him. "Grandma, please, Grandma," he whispered, his voice broken. His eyes closed, and he allowed himself to cry, hot tears streaming down his frozen face. The small lamp flame, which he had managed to relight with a final effort, flickered, threatening to go out. It was then that a distant sound broke the oppressive silence. A bark, then another. The village dogs. Sasha lifted his head abruptly, his eyes wide. He heard voices, faint at first, but approaching. A ray of hope, so intense it hurt, tore through his chest. He tried to get up, but his legs were numb. With immense effort, he crawled to the small window, wiping the ice with his hand. Outside, in the darkness of the blizzard, he saw it. Lights. They were torches, swaying in the wind, and human figures, small, but moving with determination. "Grandma!" he shouted, his voice hoarse, but filled with new strength. "They're coming, Lenny! Grandma is coming back!" He hugged his sister with a joyful desperation, trying to infuse her with the hope that had just been reborn in his own heart. Outside, Anya saw the torchlights approaching. The voices, once distant, became clearer, and she could distinguish the barking of the dogs. A weak but genuine smile appeared on her cracked lips. She stood up, stumbling, and waved the harpoon, a gesture of victory and relief. Jonas and 3 other men, their faces marked by exhaustion but their eyes full of admiration, were the first to reach her. "Anya, you're alive!" Jonas exclaimed. His voice choked. He embraced her tightly, a gesture Anya hadn't received in a long time. Other villagers, carrying sleds and tools, arrived close behind. Their gazes turned to the ox, and a murmur of astonishment and reverence swept through the group. The 11 pounds of meat, the promise of life, were there. "Lenny, Sasha," Anya whispered, concern heavy in her voice. Jonas nodded, understanding. "They're in the cabin. We need to get you back, Anya. And then, the ox." The task was monumental, but the presence of the elder, her unshakable courage, had rekindled the flame of resilience in every heart. The village of Tuktu, at the edge of the abyss, had found its way back. Anya felt Jonas's strong arms support her, a human warmth that made her stumble with exhaustion. The villagers looked at her with reverence and gratitude. The torches lit the way back, every step driven by the urgency of seeing her grandchildren. The men took turns carrying her, feeling the strength of the community that had saved them. The cold was cutting, but solidarity was a shield. In the cabin, Sasha heard dogs barking and voices clearly. He crawled to the door, opening it. The torchlight flooded the small room. Jonas entered, and behind him, supported, was Anya. Their eyes met. Anya's face was marked by cold and fatigue, but her eyes shone with unwavering love. Sasha, with Lenny in his arms, tried to stand up, but his legs gave way. Anya rushed to him, kneeling. "Lenny! Sasha!" Her voice was a hoarse whisper, full of emotion. She took Lenny, feeling the granddaughter's cold body, and hugged her in despair. "My little one, you are safe now." The villagers brought warm furs and dry firewood. The hearth crackled, the heat dissipating the oppressive cold. Anya, with Lenny nestled close, felt a familiar warmth return to her granddaughter's body. Sasha, crying tears of relief, embraced his grandmother. The cabin, once a frozen tomb, was now a refuge of life. As Lenny slowly regained consciousness with a groan and the blinking of her eyes, Anya explained her feat. The villagers listened astonished. The story of the elder who tricked the legendary great tundra ox, without shedding blood, spread like wildfire. It wasn't just food Anya had brought, it was a living legend, proof that hope should never die in Tuktu. The next day, despite the cold, the entire village mobilized. Men and women, some weak but with renewed spirit, followed Jonas to the ox. With axes and ropes they worked tirelessly, butchering the meat with respect and gratitude. Each piece was a gift, a miracle. Anya, watching from afar, felt peace. The sadness for the ox persisted, but the sight of her people working together, with life returning to their eyes, was her true victory. The meat was distributed fairly, ensuring every family had enough to survive the winter. Hunger, Tuktu's scourge, had been expelled. Fires crackled in every cabin, and the smell of roasting meat filled the air. The children, including Lenny and Sasha, who were recovering, played again, their laughter echoing in the snow. Anya sat by the hearth, her grandchildren snuggled close to her. Her body ached, a reminder of the battle on the tundra, but her heart was light. She had lost Elias, but found a strength she hadn't known she possessed. The ancestral wisdom, the love for her family, the resilience of her people, all came together in that impossible feat. Tuktu was saved, and with it, the flame of hope burned brighter, a silent testament to the indomitable courage of one woman. The human connection forged in adversity had triumphed over the cruelest winter. The days turned into weeks, and the harsh winter of the Alaskan interior persisted. But Tuktu was no longer the same. The smell of roasting meat and the warmth of the fires replaced the oppressive silence and the paralyzing cold. The cabins, previously gloomy, now radiated a welcoming light, and whispers of despair gave way to lively conversations and children's laughter. The abundance of food brought not only satiety to the bodies, but also deep relief to the souls. People moved with more energy, their steps firm on the snow, their eyes shining with a new vitality. Anya, sitting by the hearth, watched Lenny and Sasha play on the floor, their faces rosy and full of life. Lenny, fully recovered, chattered non-stop, her small fingers pointing at the dancing flames. Sasha, stronger and with his mischievous, boyish look back, told made-up stories to his sister, with exaggerated gestures that made her laugh. Anya's heart filled with a serene joy, a peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The aches in her body were still a reminder of the battle on the tundra, but they were now a sweet pain, a testament to her love and her victory. She ran her wrinkled fingers through Lenny's hair, feeling the warmth of the life that had almost been lost. In the village, Anya was now more than a respected elder. She was a living legend. People greeted her with reverence, their eyes full of gratitude and admiration. Mothers brought their children to touch her calloused hands, hoping that a bit of her courage and wisdom would be passed on. Jonas, the elder, frequently visited her not to discuss the village's problems, but to hear her stories, to absorb the silent strength she radiated. The story of how she tricked the great tundra ox without shedding a drop of blood was told and retold, inspiring everyone. Hunger had been a terrible scourge, but also a catalyst. The community of Tuktu emerged from the ordeal, more united and resilient than ever. Families shared what they had, neighbors helped each other with daily chores, and children were taught about the importance of cooperation and respect for nature. The village had learned that, even in the face of the impossible, the strength of the human spirit and the connection between people could overcome any adversity. The children's laughter now echoed louder, a hymn to the life that had been saved. One afternoon, Anya stepped out of the cabin, wrapped in warm furs, and observed the white landscape. The winter sun, low on the horizon, painted the sky with shades of orange and purple. She thought of Elias, her late husband, and felt a pang of longing, but also deep gratitude. He had taught her to hunt, to respect the tundra, to trust her own inner strength. The ox, now part of Tuktu's history, was a reminder that life and death were intrinsically linked, and that sacrifice, when driven by love, could generate new hope. Winter still punished the Alaskan interior with its relentless cold, but Tuktu no longer feared it. The village had found not only sustenance, but a new soul. The flame of hope, ignited by the indomitable courage of one woman, now burned brighter than ever, lighting the path to a future where resilience, altruism, and human connection would be the pillars of their existence. Anya, with a serene smile on her lips, knew that the true victory was not in bringing down a giant, but in reigniting the light in the hearts of her people, a legacy that would endure. The months that followed confirmed this certainty. Snow continued to fall, the wind to howl, and the thermometer to plummet to unimaginable temperatures. But the village of Tuktu had transformed. It wasn't just the food that had returned, it was the very essence of life that pulsed with renewed strength. The cabins, once silent and cold, now resonated with the buzz of voices and the warmth of the hearths. The smell of roasting meat and fresh bread was a constant reminder of the abundance Anya had brought. Lenny and Sasha, robust and full of energy, were living proof of the victory. Lenny, with her bright eyes, ran around the cabin, her laughter infectious. Sasha, more mature than his age suggested, helped Jonas and the other men prepare for the next hunting season, his movements now confident and purposeful. He carried with him not only the memory of despair, but the invaluable lesson of his grandmother's courage. Anya, although her body still felt the weight of age and adventure, found a new purpose in her life. She became the keeper of stories, the voice that narrated the deeds of her ancestors and the miracle of the great tundra ox. Children gathered around her, their eyes wide as she described the tundra, the cold and the cunning required to survive. She taught them about respect for nature, the importance of community, and the strength that resides in perseverance. Her calloused hands, once wielding a harpoon, now wove baskets and mended furs, each stitch an act of love and wisdom. The village of Tuktu flourished. The young, inspired by Anya's story, faced the challenges of the tundra with a renewed spirit. Hunting, though still difficult, was approached with a new strategy, combining ancestral wisdom with attentive observation of the environment. Men and women worked side by side, sharing the burden and the joy of small daily victories. The human connection, which had been tested to the limit, emerged stronger than ever. There was no longer room for despair, only for solidarity and an unwavering belief in the future. Jonas, the elder, watched Anya with a respect bordering on veneration. He knew that she had not only saved the village from hunger, she had saved its soul. Tuktu had found its heroine, and in her story, a guide for all future generations. The great tundra ox, which was once a feared legend, became a symbol of sacrifice and renewal, a reminder that life always finds a way, even in the most adverse conditions. With the arrival of spring, the first signs of thaw brought new life to the landscape. The ice began to crack, revealing the dark water underneath, and the days became a little longer. Anya, sitting at the door of her cabin, felt the air less biting on her face. Lenny and Sasha ran across the melting snow, their laughter mingling with the return of the birdsong. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply the icy air, but now full of promise. The memory of Elias still accompanied her, a gentle warmth in her heart. She knew he would be proud. Life in Tuktu would not be easy, never would be. The Alaskan interior was, and always would be, a place of extreme challenges. But now, they had something more powerful than brute strength, the indomitable flame of hope, lit by a woman who refused to give up. The village of Tuktu, forged in ice and courage, was ready to face any winter that came, united, resilient, and full of life.